There are some stories that feel like they're etched into the very bedrock of human memory. We call them myths, legends, warnings. But what if the most persistent of these stories, what if it isn't a myth at all? What if it's an echo of a time before our own, a time of global annihilation?
We're always looking to the past for answers, right? We want to know the origins of who we are. But what if the past that we think we know is actually just built upon the ruins of a world that was violently and completely erased? So, to investigate this, our search doesn't begin with ancient texts or scrolls. No, it begins with the Earth itself. Because the planet keeps a record. It has a deep and silent memory of its own traumas. Geologists actually have a name for this scar on our planet's timeline. They call it the Younger Dryas. And it's so important to understand this. This isn't some fringe theory about a disaster. The geological record shows it as the hard evidence of one. About 12,800 years ago. Think about that. After thousands of years of the planet gradually warming up after the Ice Age, something happened. The climate was thrown into a violent, chaotic reverse. Something on a truly planetary scale. And the evidence for this is just undeniable. The huge northern ice sheets melted at a rate that's just not natural, unleashing, biblical volumes of fresh water into the oceans. Sea levels rose catastrophically all at once. And the largest animals on Earth, the mammoths, the saber-toothed cats, they just vanished forever. The whole world was plunged into a watery chaos. Now, a wound of that magnitude, it wouldn't just scar the planet. It would sear itself into the consciousness of anyone who survived. It would become an echo, one that would reverberate through all of time. So it begs the question, right? If a civilization actually existed that witnessed this global reset, wouldn't they have left behind some kind of warning? A detailed account of what they saw? Well, the historical record is clear. They did. The account speaks of a messenger, Nu, sent to his people. And get this, his mission wasn't a matter of years or even decades. We're talking centuries, a 950-year warning, a period of grace of almost unimaginable length. So his role, it was simple and it was absolutely terrifying. He was the warner. Sent to a civilization that was at the very peak of its power and arrogance to warn it against its own hubris, to foretell a cleansing punishment that would spare no one who refused to listen. You might think a message like that would be met with some sober consideration, but it wasn't. It was met with pure scorn, and a deep societal conflict erupted, a clash between a divine warning and the arrogance of the entire established order. So on one side, you have this desperate plea for repentance, a warning of a momentous day, and on the other, just the raw mockery of the elites. They brushed him off as just another man, followed only by, in their words, the lowest of us. They looked at their power, their buildings, their knowledge, and they laughed. When will this threat be? They challenged him. So, after centuries of these warnings going completely unheeded, the final command was given, and it wasn't to argue anymore. It was to build, to construct this massive vessel of salvation under direct divine guidance, all while the mocking of the world just continued around him. An unbelievable act of faith in the face of total disbelief. And then, the promised day arrived, and the punishment was not a simple storm. It was the deconstruction of the world itself, a fury unleashed from every possible direction at once. The historical record here is terrifyingly specific. This wasn't just rain. The text says the gates of the sky were opened, and at the exact same time, the very ground itself split apart, gushing forth with water from deep below. The waters from above and the waters from below met. A synchronized annihilation for a matter that had, quote, already been decreed. This wasn't a storm that had a beginning and an end. The downpour was constant. It was relentless. It had this terrible driving purpose. It was unceasing. No defense could possibly stand against it. The rising tide just swept past every barrier. It swallowed every single landmark. It dismantled an entire civilization piece by piece. It was overwhelming. Every valley filled, every mountain was submerged. There was no high ground left, no sanctuary from the rising, dark waters. The erasure of the old world, it was complete. And the ark, this vessel of salvation, was now adrift, not on a sea, but in a world-ending torrent. The text describes the waves not just as large, but as being like mountains.
an unimaginable scale of watery violence that just tossed the last survivors of humanity through the wreckage of their own drowned civilization.
And after the unbelievable fury of the storm, came this profound and terrible silence. The world that was simply no more, and in its place was only water.
The judgment was absolute. The record is stark, and it leaves no room for doubt. Everything on the land that drew breath was annihilated. It was a complete and total reset of all life on Earth. Just try to imagine that sight, the Ark, all alone, floating on a calm, shoreless ocean that covered even the highest mountain peaks. The sky is still dark. You can hear the silence of an empty planet, a world returned to its primordial, watery state, cleansed and awaiting a new beginning.
And just as it began by a divine command, so it ended. The earth was ordered to swallow its water, the sky was ordered to stop, and slowly the floodwaters receded, the matter was finished, and the ark, carrying the seed of a new world, finally came to rest.
So the survivors step out onto a fresh, barren earth, under a silent sky, and history begins again. And all of this leaves us with a profound and frankly disturbing question. If the geological scar of the Younger Dryas and the persistent echo in our oldest human stories both point to a world that was drowned, was this the first global reset? And maybe more importantly, will it be the last?